When you look at the TV, the magazines, your phone, the singers on the radio, singers on the YouTube, do you see people who look like you and your mates? Or do you see a different culture, a different taste aesthetic, something that makes you feel like you are unlike others? Now we've got smartphones, we can choose to follow those that we aspire to be or might have similar ways of being in the world. Yet there was a time not very long ago where if you lived in Australia and you weren't Anglo, you rarely saw yourself or your world reflected in the culture around you. And when those moments did show up, sometimes they changed your life. And that is what happened to my guest this week, Hau Latukefu, a grandmaster of the Australian music industry, a man who is one of the cornerstones of hip-hop culture in our country, an ARIA winner with his band Koolism, a man who is the voice of hip-hop on Triple J, a man who is a mentor to bands that are changing the game right now, including the devastating Western Sydney drill rap powerhouse ONEFOUR. It's a great conversation about growing up as a part of the Pacific diaspora in Queanbeyan, about music, family, and hard bloody work. All of which he's written about in his brand new book, King.
I had to work, for when I first moved to Sydney, we had just won an ARIA award. I was working retail, like that's just what you have to do. Like by any means, you work to support your dreams or your passion. And just knowing that, and knowing that is fine as well, because I think there's a kind of shame, like you're a rapper, but then you're a tradie at the same time. It's like, no, that's like you said, that's just the way it is. And there are very few that get to live purely off making music. I didn't know it's going to be on radio. I didn't know. There's no way I thought I was ever going to write a book, but these opportunities came up, and I took them. And it was because I would constantly work, whether it's retail or, like mixing concrete. I did what I needed to do in order to keep this passion alive, because that's what made me truly happy.
That is Australian hip-hop legend Hau Latukefu. And this is Osher Günsberg, Better Than Yesterday. Hau is a legend of the Australian music industry, a cornerstone of hip-hop culture in our country. And he's a man that mentored ONEFOUR in and out of prison. He has a brilliant story. He's just the sweetest guy. He's humble, he's profound, and extraordinary to listen to in the way that he speaks about his deep, deep love for music, how hard he will work to keep that music in his life. He's written a book called King, which is out right now. So while you search for how you can buy that, enjoy this conversation with Hau Latukefu. I'm so fucking stoked to speak with you today, Hau, because we kind of had slightly kind of parallel journeys along this music, along this music industry.
I grew up watching you on Channel V, and I know you're close with Dave and Catch and that.
Here's the thing, man. I was going to throw a surprise your way, because I'm like, sometimes I try to find a way that I can connect with the people I talk to in this pod, but there's never been anyone on the podcast that I can say, I've played in the same band as you. Those guys changed my life. We're talking about you did a track with Resin Dogs, Dave Atkins and DJ Catch, two absolute gods of hip-hop in Brisbane and now Northern New South Wales.
Yeah.
And I used to play double bass for them for maybe about a year or so. Yeah. And like growing up and reading your book, King, I was seeing the same cultural inputs you were seeing. I didn't have the mixtape black market kind of, situation that you did to open my eyes to some of the other music that you were having. But I certainly saw the films and rented the videos and saw what was on telly at the time. And I remember when I first, Dave produced my band's second CD, and I played double bass on it. And he said, man, come, I'm just doing this jam thing with Catch. Come play. And I stood in this rehearsal room in the Valley, and it was just me, Dave on drums, and DJ Catch. There was no rapper at that point.
How old were you at this time?
Fuck.
You like teenager?
It's 95. I was 21.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah.
And 21, 22. And I was like, this is it. This is everything. And I was playing in a funk metal band at the time. I was playing 5-string basses and doing 7, 8 songs, and I wanted to be Les Claypool and Soundgarden at the same time. And I sat with these guys just locking into Dave's hi-hat. He was the greatest drummer I'd ever seen in my life. And I couldn't believe that my musical hero wanted me to play in his band. And I was like, that 3 hours in that rehearsal room was like, this is the fucking greatest thing it was just transcendent. All right. They ended up getting a guy who's a far better bass player than me, Chris Bosley, and they went on to rightful
Chris,
international acclaim. But I'll never, ever forget being in that room, and it was just Catch with vinyl. There was no sequencer at that point, and Dave on drums and me on double bass, and it was like it was just amazing. And
wow.
Yeah, I wish I could have been better as a bass player and probably tried. If I took here's the thing, Hal, I wrote about this in my book. It's like if I had taken my double bass playing as seriously as I'd taken my drinking and drug taking, I probably would have still been in that band. But that's a long story.
But I don't know, man. I think, obviously you feel the way you feel, but it's not a bad detour.
Yeah, it is. Look, bro, I got to say, I'm so happy that you've written a book because it documents two extraordinary things in Australia. It documents the experience of the Pacific Island diaspora in our country, one of which I have come to know. My wife's from Fiji. They came here after the big coup in '87,
right.
and I've spent a lot of time in the Pacific Islands. Spent time in Tonga. I haven't been to Samoa yet, and it also documents this. I have a story. It's my story. I'm not able to tell it. It doesn't sound like a Slim Dusty song. It doesn't sound like an Angel song. It doesn't sound like a Crowded House song. Oh, it sounds like that. Right. And it's such a beautifully written book, and the warmth and love of the warmth and love of the family barbecues that you describe is exactly what I have experienced in the time that I've known Audrey and her family. And in the early days when there's too many so everyone's auntie and uncle, fine.
Everyone's cousin.
Yeah. And, the idea of, we're going to eat this pig from hoof to snout, like, all right. It's just incredible, man. And then, when we talk about that, you've talked about your music career, to have been, just kind of almost like riding in separate lanes on the same freeway, and that you took over from our friend Maya Jupiter on the Hip Hop Show on Triple J, and would have, been the voice of hip hop and this beautiful language that has allowed so many people in our country to express themselves and to find resonance. And like, that's more like me than that. It's, you play such an important role in this country. So firstly, like, thanks heaps for writing the book. And I think
I'm humbled. Thank you,
dude. Like, you can't understate how important you have been in our cultures, in our country's culture. But that's just after I've just had to tell you that shit after reading it. But the other thing I have to tell you,
thank you, I appreciate that.
The man that produces this podcast, Andy Marr, went to school with you.
Andy Marr. Where is this connected?
You're in the same music class in Queanbeyan.
Yeah, but where's the connection with?
He produces this podcast. He cuts this show. He's been cutting and producing this show for 6 years now.
So how did you meet? Like, how did I
meet Andy?
That blows my yeah.
Andy used to work on Take 40 Australia. He would edit Take 40 Australia when he worked at MCM, and reached out to me after he went solo. Like, many forward-thinking people in the radio industry, they're like, podcasting. And so he made the move quite early. He's gone indie, and he's is exceptional. He's now way too busy he's not way too busy. AndyMarr.com is still accepting clients. He's very busy because he's fucking good at what he does, man. But
wow, it
did make me think.
It's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, but it did make me think, like, why Queanbeyan? Because you're not the only person to come out. There's like a bunch of people who've come out of Queanbeyan. What is it about Queanbeyan? Why? It's just,
I don't know. We have a running joke about, per capita, Queanbeyan is probably producing most of the great talents coming out. But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. Obviously Mark Webber It's from Queanbeyan. The amount of rugby league and union players coming out of Queanbeyan. George Lazenby, of course. Andy Ma, add to that list. And Omar
Yeah,
Musa,
Omar bin
as
Musa. Yeah,
well.
like
And
that's the other one I was thinking of.
yeah,
It's kind of something, isn't it? Is it because to get out of Queanbeyan you have to reach an escape velocity that's just so at such a propulsion by
well,
the time you
yeah,
get to Sydney, people are like, whoa, and you're just undeniable?
yeah. I think it is that the isolation did play a big part. Because we're rural New South Wales, country New South Wales, really. We're a town that's on the border of Canberra, so we weren't quite part of Sydney or wider Sydney or and we weren't part of Canberra. You say you're from Queanbeyan, and when you're in Canberra, and people are like, oh, Queanbeyan, like trying to skedaddle you back across the border. So I think it really was, just that isolation allowed you to really hone your craft, and
Mm.
if you're not playing sports in winter, you're inside pretty much, just freezing there.
When and I love the fact that you wrote in your your book, like your family was the first family from your part of the world to land in Queanbeyan. That's like, we're landing on
Yeah,
fucking Mars.
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. It's a big. My mom came over when she was 17. To study nursing, and I think about when you're growing up, you hear those stories, and you just like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And it's not until you get older, and especially when you have kids, you're like, wow, 17, you're still. I mean, at 17, you think you can take on the world, but
Yeah.
as you get older, you realize like 17 is still a baby.
Yeah.
And especially in the 60s, and moving from Tonga to Leeton, where she went to,
Yeah.
like that is like rural New South Wales, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing accomplishment, and the father as well, coming over, anyone that's come from out, any country moving to Australia at such a young age, is wild.
When your parents talk about like 17 years old and coming from Tonga, like very clearly, wearing clothes that are probably made by an auntie, um,
Mm.
how does she describe what the country was like?
Yeah, she said it was definitely a culture shock, but she had some great friends there,
Mm.
and she had some wonderful people looking after her that she would call her mum and dad as
Right.
well. And
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, my mom would say, "Oh, this is like mom and dad is like two white country people." I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
But she'd explain like, they really looked after me when I came, and like parents to her. And of course, she ran into some racism, some ignorance, but I guess that kind of helped build some resilience. And she's just very ambitious, and yeah, she loved the country life.
Your home when you were little sounds like a place of just so much noise and love and music and constant smell of cooking.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate that my dad cooked as well, and I often credit him for the man I've become today, because my mom, again, very ambitious, took herself to uni later on in life, and while she was away, my dad would hold the fort down. He'd work, he's a painter and decorator, and then come home, clean, cook. And I grew up watching him do that, and so there was no real kind of designated roles in our house. So I thank my dad for that. But yeah, he would cook a lot, and my mom would cook a lot, and
Yeah.
yeah, obviously music played a big part. My sister's 4 years older, so she got me into like
Ah,
Duran, and the Thompson Twins, and how obviously like the Michael Jacksons and Madonnas and all that sort of stuff. And my dad loved country music
yeah.
as well, and so it was what surrounded, and most importantly, it was a safe space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love in there. And my parents have been married 50 years, so I've grown up watching them. Like be that foundation for
Yeah.
us and for themselves.
There's a maybe people who aren't, I've never been enough. There's a misconception about Pacific Island communities. Like, country is fucking on. And like you'll be
It is.
but you'll be listening to Black
Yeah.
Rose 1 second, and then you'll be listening to Hank Williams the next. Like, and everyone know all the words to everything.
Yeah. I grew up just thinking, oh, Dad just likes country. I don't know why. But in Queanbeyan there's a QBN FM, and they played a lot of country, and I just never understood why, but it was what it was. And then I realized that a lot of Tongan music sounds similar to country.
Oh.
Like there's a lot of banjos, a lot of slide guitars, and the melodies, and I clicked. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But yeah, it was just funny sometimes driving. He'd drive me to rugby, and he'd just be playing country, and I was like, yeah, this music's not really amping me up, Dad.
Oh man, when I used to take G to water polo when she's finished high school now, but when I used to drive her to water polo, she'd be like, got to get my playlist on, and like she'd have an amp up like it was like before the wrestling. Water polo's like rugby and water rugby, and she was like a wrestler walking out. It was awesome. I used to love it. There's this great line in the book which, I mean, it was true for you as a kid in the 80s, and it's, God damn, mate, it's true today. Unfortunately, that racism and rugby are two of Australia's favourite things. Very occasionally, one can cancel the other out. And I read that and I just stopped. I was like, oh, shit. Just considering, who's playing for who in the Rugby League World Cup, it's like, oh, yes, it's 2022. And it kind of made me kind of happy, like made me sad that something that was real for you when you were less than 10 years old is still real now.
Yeah, it was interesting though. I felt like, I mean, you know what it's like Australia's sports mad, and I feel, like I said in the book, I feel like that was our way into society, into community,
Yeah.
We'd be great on the rugby field, maybe a bit different off, but once you kind of felt like you gained people's respect through sport, it made it, I feel like it made it a bit easier to, I guess, assimilate, whereas a lot of people that didn't come from, rugby union playing nations, had it tougher, especially, my friends, Italian friends and Greek friends, all playing football, like playing soccer.
Yeah.
And, like during the 80s, they just call it wogball. And I was just like, wow, okay. People just didn't understand the sport and were kind of almost ostracized. And yeah, I think playing rugby union kind of allowed me to be like, not allowed me, but people, tend to see me in a different light.
I guess, when I think about, when you just listen to you say that right there, it's like, well, I guess it's a visual language that people could understand. We can watch the way someone,
a common ground.
Yeah. But also we can watch the way someone plays the ball. We can go, oh yeah, I would have done that, or actually, pretty good move.
Mm-hmm.
We can. It's a visual. It's a form of what sign language. Sign language is I'm moving my hands and my body in a particular way to convey an idea. There's ways that you can watch a great rugby player and you can kind of go, oh, I can see what's going on inside that person's head just by the way they're moving, by the way their shoulder moves when they see the halfback come their way. And maybe that's what it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like throwing it out there. Maybe that's what it is. There's a moment in the book which I'm so grateful you wrote, because I think in 100 years from now, we'll look back on this moment and go, and that is where the lightning struck and created glass. And then that's where someone picked it up and went, oh, this is hot sand. If I heat this hard enough, I can make glass. Boom. Now we've got glasses, magnifying glasses, we've got telescopes, we can see this, we can see our place in the universe all from this one fucking thing, right? Which is what happened. In Australia, I think we saw it on Countdown. In America, because they didn't play the video on TV, in America, they saw it at the 1983 Grammys. It was Herbie Hancock's Rocket. This
Rocket.
This moment in time when the record scratch first happened. And it literally tears music in two at that moment. Do you remember the first time you saw it?
You know what? I remember watching that and I totally forgot about that. and you just remind me of seeing that, because they did have the robots in there too, right? Like in
Yeah.
the live performance.
They
And
were
but
pneumatic.
yeah,
They were running off
yeah,
air,
yeah,
so it was really creepy.
yeah. I wrote about a lot of those moments, and Herbie Hancock Rocket was, because you'd see hip hop in different songs, like Blondie, like
Yeah,
Rapture. It wasn't a
yeah,
full hip hop song, but obviously had the rapping, and the video had the graffiti, and you'd see it Malcolm McLaren, with the dancing and the fashion, and again with Herbie Hancock and Rocket. Even like Shaka Khan, like Feel
yeah,
For You, like you see the scratching and the dancing, and yeah, all of that really intrigued me. And then seeing Rocksteady Crew, like just dancing in like all matching outfits, looking like Motown, but like top rocking and
yeah,
doing groundwork, and yeah, it was just super fascinating. And just my sister was into it first, obviously, and then I followed,
yeah.
and bro, like I can't fully explain that. I mean, you probably felt the same too, when you saw it. You were just like, what the hell is this? Like, I want this. I need to be a part of this. How do I do it? Like, I
Yeah.
need to get into it. And, growing up in Queanbeyan, unfortunately, we couldn't, we didn't have the music, had to go to other cities to buy it. But yeah, those moments were super special. And, shout out to Molly Meldrum, who did an interview with Rocksteady Crew. And yeah, it was awesome to see.
It really is people like, I mean, Debbie Harry had no business rapping, and if you listen to the rap, it's like she just found words that
Yeah,
rhymed.
yeah,
Yet
yeah.
it was safe enough for people to, because at the time, anyone who was not white rapping on television was terrifying. Like
Yeah,
actually terrifying. Like, we need to put it.
yeah.
This is only after 10 o'clock at night. We can't have this. And so here's this white woman, very white woman, rapping. And I could
Mm.
argue as well that Freddie Mercury, Another One Bites the Dust, like, he'd been spending a lot of time in New
Right,
York.
true.
He'd been spending a
Yeah,
lot of time in New York, and here's this kind of, oh, it's the same riff, it's the same loop over
yeah,
and over and over again, and here he is in the rhyme, in the beat, on the
yeah.
beat.
In that pocket, yeah,
But so, oh, here's this thing, and it became kind of, more accessible. But I say it all the time in the show: you can't beat what you can't see. And so when I watch telly,
yeah,
I see other white people doing stuff, and I can do that.
yeah.
As a young Tongan kid in Queanbeyan, like, you never see anyone who looks like you on telly.
Nah, nah. And that's why I take my role very seriously, because I understand representation matters. Just being in certain spaces and showing your face in there, and having people, because I grew up like that, like exactly what you said. Watching TV, the only times you would see a Pacific Islanders, maybe on the football field, maybe on the news, but even in newspaper and media in general, you would never see it. And yeah, and you just didn't feel like you can achieve certain things. And but that's why, yeah, when I ventured out and was, on radio, and in the, not only as an artist but actually in the record label office, and it was important to me to kind of break down a lot of doors, and then more importantly, reach back
Yeah.
and encourage others to follow suit. And learn from what I had learned, and then take it further. That's the thing. It's like being a parent. That's your ideal goal, isn't it? Like for your kids to build on what you've built, and then take it further.
And it's when we say it to all our kids, it's like, listen, like, I'm telling you this because I learned it, and I learned it because it hurt a lot. It cost me a lot of money. I had to spend time in hospital. I don't know, whatever. It's like, but I want to save you all that by telling you, just do this and do that.
Mm.
Okay? You can find out the hard way, but I'm just trying to save you time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the important thing I learned being a mentor was doing that, but then understanding they need to find out in their own time.
Yeah.
Because everyone takes their journey differently, and I would get, mentoring a lot of young artists, I would get
Yeah.
like offended if I say, look, yeah, you can do that, but I think you should do this, because if you do that, this is going to happen. And then of course they go do it, and that happens. And I was like, man, I told you. But then I realized that you can't do that. You can't say I told you so and then make them feel even worse. So I just had to learn, like, you just have to present
Yeah.
the options, and then they have to, because they just feel a lot better too if they make their own decisions. And I feel that they're able to sit with their own mistakes instead of the mistakes that you've made them have.
That's one part of either parenting or mentoring is the trying to help people basically start where you finished. I got here,
Yeah,
it cost me a lot of money or great injury or broken relationships or broken hearts or whatever. So this is where I ended up with everything I know. Here's everything I know. Go from there. That's one
yeah,
side of it. The other side of it is affirmation. Is going, yeah, that's really good. Whatever you're doing, just keep doing more of that.
yeah.
I'm guessing you didn't have a hip hop mentor early on, but you wrote with such love, and I think it's super important because it happened to me. You wrote with such love about the teacher that you performed for, like, you asked to do a poem. You may have leaned quite heavily on Ice-T for inspiration, but
just lightly, yeah.
the affirmation of that teacher in that moment of you standing in front
Mm.
of a class, essentially rapping, what did that do for you?
Yeah, it was that, the affirmation is important. Even though it wasn't my rhymes, but the fact that he thought it was, and it was very encouraging. And that's what a lot of my approach to mentoring is like, hey, I see you, you're doing awesome. If you need anything, hit me back. And that's what I felt like with that teacher. It was very encouraging, and that there is nothing like encouragement from someone you look up to or hold in high regard, and it just gives you the extra energy to be like, all right, this is sweet. I'm on the way. I'm on the right path.
Did you ever get a chance to tell Ice-T you did that?
Nah, nah. I haven't actually interviewed Ice-T, and
Ah!
he's definitely one for the bucket list. But
Yeah, man.
yeah, writing this book, I've always been a fan of Ice-T, but writing this book, I didn't realize how much a part of the story he is. Like I wrote in the book at the time about school social and bugging the DJ to play "I'm Your Pusher," and then that moment of like taking his rhymes for my poetry, and the first concert I saw as a 17-year-old was at ANU, Public Enemy and Ice-T.
Oh my
And, my cousin
God.
was my cousin was working at the door, and he's like, "Okay, come in." And yeah, it was amazing. It was, for me, that was at their height. Like watching those guys perform, arguably some of the best to ever do it, and that just blew my mind.
That what tour was it? Was it the Apocalypse 91 or Fear of a Black Planet?
No, yeah, I think it was Fear of a Black Planet,
Right.
because it would have been, yeah, 91 ish, 92, something like that. I think I was
Uh,
still at high school, and
Unbelievable.
yeah,
Like like as your first gig to go, oh,
yeah, yeah,
here I am, and there's S1Ws on stage. Like, this is
yeah.
unfucking believable.
And it
That
was
would have
like
been amazing.
kind of, I mean, compared to all the shows you see him, the big stage, ANU was a small stage, but still had the S1Ws there doing their routines, Terminator X, like Flavor Flav jumping all around the place. It was wild. And as a 17-year-old kid that's kind of discovering himself and delving deeper into hip hop, my mind was blown.
There's probably plenty of other people in Queanbeyan. Like, we all saw this. Like I said, it was a time of cultural scarcity. So we all, saw the same kind of music videos on TV. We all heard the same
Mm.
songs on the radio. We might have circulated similar mixtapes, but not everyone became what you became. How? Where did work ethic come into it?
I think, I was talking to someone about the other day. I think once I was very fortunate to discover my passion early. Like hip hop music in general, I loved it, and like you said, so did everyone else. But then in high school, I was like, I'm gonna be a rapper. That's all I'm gonna be, either a rapper or play for the Wallabies. Like that was my
Two pretty
end
fucking
goals,
good
and
ideas, man. I'm down with that's pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah, I was aiming high, and yeah. So from high school, it's unfortunate because we do, especially myself when I'm teaching kids, like teaching, selflessness. It's important. But when you figured out your passion and you know what you want to do, you become selfish. because that's, you're blocking out everything, and not I don't want to do that. No, I'm going to be a rapper. I'm just tunnel vision from that, and it's because of the passion and because I loved it. I didn't know it was going to be a career. Like, I didn't care it was going to be a career. I just wanted, that's all I wanted to do was rap, and just constantly every day writing. Sometimes a line, two lines, verse, maybe a whole song, but constantly. And I still have a lot of the exercise books that I had throughout high school years. And in my backpack would be school books and rhyme book and a Walkman. Later became a Discman, and that was it. I just wanted to be a rapper, and released my first tape in year 12 as a 17-year-old kid, and from then it's like that's the first step. I've released a tape, and that tape was at our local record store, Impact Records, which is an institution. And I saw my tape there on the shelf next to the Ice Teas, next to the Public Enemies, next to the Del, the Punk, the Homo Sapiens. Like it was there, and I was like, I could see it. Like, oh yes, like I'm going. Like, I don't care where this goes from now. I'm just going.
Yeah.
And from then on, then I partnered with Daniel's son, who was part of that tape, but he also taught me a lot about, because I'm Islander, I'm running on Islander time, to turn up at 12, I'll tell, oh yeah, 1:30, yeah, I'll be all right. But he would constantly be like, you can't do that. I'm waiting here. We got work to do, and so he introduced a lot of that, and combination of everything, and just brought me to where I am today.
About 10 years ago now, actually, I lived in Venice Beach. I was just about the end of a decade of living in America, and I was in Venice Beach, and I lived in the back house of a kind of compound that had two houses on it, and the woman in the front, she had two kids, like 8 and 10, and she was an artist. She'd gone to this massive art college in Chicago. So how did you get into this art college? Did you have to submit a portfolio? She goes, oh, fuck yeah, like this huge thing, I had canvases and all that kind of stuff. So you get to art school, and you already know how to paint. You already know how to use. Oh yeah. So what do they teach you? She goes, oh, they don't teach us how to paint. They teach you how to replicate creativity. That is what art school is.
Yeah,
3 hours, like 3 years of it. I said, what do you mean?
Yeah.
She goes, oh, so it's such and such a Picasso painting. I can't remember the name of it, but let's, maybe the one with the 5 women in the 5 sex workers. She goes, you only ever see that. And she goes, what you don't see, and then she said, they showed us a picture of Picasso's studio, and there's 116 versions of it, all set around the walls.
Yeah, wow. Well, yeah.
But that's the one that he released. And she goes, you just show up every day. You get there on time, you pick up the brush, and you go. And trust that the creativity will arrive, but if you don't get to the studio, if you don't pick up the brush, it'll never happen. So I'm interested to hear, in your experience, the idea of just, I don't care if it's our line, the idea of just showing up and putting pen to paper and being prepared for it to be shit. What role does that play in ultimately coming up with the thing that, oh, this is the one I'll release?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, isn't it? Like, for everyone, it's different. I'm very fortunate that I was always inspired, always motivated, and maybe it is because of that. I never really thought about it. It's maybe because I would always have the rhyme book with me, and would always either draw or write a line. But every day, without a doubt, for hours, would be doing something. So maybe it was that training of the brain, or training of the energies, or whatever you want to call it. It would just constantly come. And, I think also growing up in Queanbeyan, maybe that, if you weren't playing sports, maybe if you were skating or something, but there wasn't much else to do. Summer you'd probably go to the pool, but, I'd hang out with family. That was beautiful, of course. And that was a source of inspiration for me as well. Later on, when I had kids, and was kind of working outside of music, that's when I really had to tap into that source of creativity, because a lot of things, as you would know, like, a lot of things were kind of pushed to the back because there were other priorities and responsibilities.
Yep.
And I just want to go into the story because it's very important, and it talks to your question is, I saw a healer about it. I wasn't particularly going to see her about this, But my wife was going, and she said, "Oh, I think you should come." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "But you need to go with intent." And I was like, "Oh, I was thinking, oh, I'm pretty sweet. Like, I don't think I have anything in particular to go to see her about." And my wife said, "Oh, for me, I think you're not living up to your full potential." And I was kind of taken aback, like, what? But I took that on board and saw the healer, and yeah, she was like, "Yeah, I understand. There are all these things that in the way of music, but music is what makes you truly happy. So we have to figure out a way to tap into that creativity, because there's no longer that whole day process of finding it, because you got
Yeah.
so many other things to do. Like, you're gonna have to designate a time to be creative and get to it. Because as you know, as a creative, you're kind of waiting for it to come a lot of the times. But she made it a thing to be like, no, this is your time to do it, and that's when you have to do it.
You're not going to pull off the most amazing turn surfing if you don't paddle out. You just got to put the wetsuit on. You just got to go. You got to get out there. There was something that I'm kind of interested, and I do want to talk to you about this because I think you have a unique perspective of it. I remember the way that I loved bands and I loved music in a time of cultural scarcity. How in a time of this is the one. Oh, it's one Eazy-E song and the one NWA song that I have on this tape. All right. Or this is the one video that I caught off Rage. And I will watch it 10 times a day because that's the only one I've got. And I will study every single nuance of it. Every bar, every hi-hat, every bass line. Oh, that other rapper came in here. Where's that sample from? Who plays bass there? And how that repetition and that just appreciation of it, combined with, as you mentioned before, there's nothing else to do. I'm bored. My subconscious is full of this thing. I'm going to create something based upon what I've been feeding my subconscious. So that was a time where both you and I kind of grew up. I'm a bit older than you, but we grew up in that time. Versus now, where I have, and I remember going to Sydney to buy records from Brisbane. Because that was the only place in the country I'd go to Utopia because that was the only place I could get these metal records, right? They didn't have them in Brisbane. And here's this vinyl that cost me like a week pay. And I'd listen to it just hundreds of times and digest
Looking
every
at the liner notes
single
and,
part
reading
of it.
everything,
That versus I have every song ever recorded in the palm of my hand. So I will stop listening 8 bars in and listen to something else. And I'm never bored. So, in your mind, like how does creativity get affected by the second scenario when we have nothing but everything and we are never bored?
That's interesting. Yeah, I was just thinking about the other day, like you talking about your trip coming from Brisbane. I would do that from Queanbeyan.
Yeah,
Like catch the bus up and go shopping and just have even buying an album and then trying to, if it's a bad album, trying to convince yourself that it was good because you already spent the money. And
fuck, I've done that.
Like, oh, no, I think I do like this record. Like, yeah, maybe only half of it's cool. No, it was worth it. Yeah, and those trips made you appreciate that music a lot more. Whereas now, like you said, you have like millions of songs in the palm of your hands, and you're just like skipping through them. Like my daughter, she likes to watch trailers. I'm like, she won't watch the movie. She'll just watch the trailer and then watch the next trailer and watch the next trailer. And I'm like, why don't you watch the movie? And I kind of get it. Like they kind of get in the gist of the movie in 2 minutes, and then and I think that's what music has become as well. It's no longer where you put on the tape and you got to let the tape play through, and then you flip the tape over and you got to let the whole tape play through as well. Now it's just skipping. I mean, like we had that with CDs, but I think it's just so overwhelming now. Not only with music but with visuals, content, everything, and the fact that it's so hard to, as an artist, try and figure out how to cut through all that and differentiate yourself from other artists.
What do you tell the artists that you're mentoring and you're working with? What do you tell them when it comes to almost how to prepare for, this is where the creative stuff, do you like try not to listen to other stuff? Do you say, I'll just kind of maybe listen to a bit more of that? Do you say maybe take a holiday, leave your phone at home? Like, what do you tell them?
Yeah, all of that, whatever works. I definitely tell them you need to be truthful with yourself.
Yeah.
And why are you making music? Are you making music because it makes you feel good? It's self-expression, or are you making music because it's a cool thing to do now? Like you want the views, you want the streams. Once you figure that out, that's how we move. Because, but in saying that, I tend to gravitate towards young artists who have already kind of made their mind up where they want to go.
Yeah.
And a lot of them aren't necessarily, I mean, obviously we want the views and the streams, but their art is more important, whether 10,000 people see it or a million people see it. And then it's about longevity, and they understand that and understand that in an age of instant gratification, you may not get that. And it might take you a few years before people cotton on to what you are really trying to do. And a lot of the artists I work with understand that, and it's quite refreshing, because there are a lot of artists I come across that, I remember one artist said, "Oh, I've already uploaded 10 songs on SoundCloud. Like, why not pop it?" I was like, I mean, you have to still, you can be like, "What the fuck? That's nothing," but you got to understand where they're coming from. You know what I mean? They see, like, for a lot of artists, they even put out 5 and then all of a sudden playing Rolling Loud. It's about managing their expectations, and that's super important, tactfully as well.
Tactfully, because going back to the parenting
Honestly,
mentor thing. I'm not saying don't give up. I'm not saying stop trying. I'm just saying,
I'm not saying shit, but
no.
listen.
Yeah. We talked a bit about, the idea of, Australia being a racist country. Many people would like to think that we're not, but the new flash here is that we are, and we really have to have a long, hard look at ourselves. You wrote about this in the book, and it really hit me, because I used to work with the guy who wrote the Triple M promo, No Rap Crap. I worked with him, and he thought it was the best thing in the world, and it was the defining, definition branding point of that station that aired every 10 minutes, 24 hours a day for years. What does it feel like to turn on mainstream radio and hear that?
Yeah, I mean, part of me was like, I don't give a fuck. I'm listening to what I listen to anyway. But another part of me was like, yeah, cool, like hip hop. Why be so blatant and almost hateful about it? Like, just because you don't understand it or play it, like it's not necessary to put that kind of energy out. But also it was, hip hop was always a very DIY, anti-establishment music and culture. So those kind of things would almost spur you on, because fuck radio, But I remember also being a kid and kind of admiring people that could just turn on the radio and loved every song, whereas I was like trying to search, like, oh, I might get a Michael Jackson song here and there, or Lionel Richie or something, and it wasn't until I got older and discovered community radio, and they had like specialty programs. And I don't think we place enough emphasis on community radio and how much they've contributed to not only hip hop but other other genres, and really cultivated grassroots in Australia. And obviously you work Triple J, and we can big up Triple J for taking it to the masses, but the community radio is very important, because they were the ones really backing things from the start.
Oh yeah, man! In Brisbane, that is the only Triple Z were the only people playing Public Enemy,
Big up
the
for
only
Triple
people
Z,
playing NWA, the only people. Like I heard Body Count on Triple Z before I heard it anywhere. Body Count, when Ice-T came out with Body Count, and particularly the song, there was 2 huge songs on that first Body Count record that people fucking shut themselves. Like I remember playing it. I remember playing that record, and like
At home.
thinking I was watching Evil Dead, and I had to pause it like, whoa, the fuck, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and people were terrified. So there was There Goes the Neighborhood and Cop Killer,
Killer, yeah.
which, you know, if you're listening to this, go enjoy watching the stories that you'll find online about when Cop Killer came out and Charlton Heston and all that shit. But they were so fucking terrifying because they were using metal or rock and roll, like language, again, a non-visual language, a non-verbal language that wasn't really associated with African-American people. And There Goes the Neighborhood is pretty much said, like, who let them in the club? Who let them play? This is just for white people. You're not allowed to do this. And people were terrified. And only occasionally have bands that dangerous shown up. And I would argue that AB Original in our country are that dangerous.
That was a NWA Public Enemy moment.
Oh yeah. Like, and then 1-4 shows up, and people shit their pants because, like, how? No, you can't talk about that. So you can't talk. You're not allowed to talk about this stuff. And the response is like, this is the stuff in my neighborhood, in the system that you are in charge of. I'm fucking talking about it. And it's that uncomfortable conversation that I think is at the root of why certain authority figures are weird about 1-4. What do you remember about the first time you heard 1-4?
I was just excited because, you know, obviously I was listening to music similar to that was coming out from the UK, and, you know, growing up through the 80s and 90s, there were groups like, you know, like Buddy Count and NWA. Ghetto Boys was another one.
Ghetto Boys!
I remember the first time I listened to Ghetto Boys was on this tape. It was a dub that Frank gave me, and so it was kind of like a bit warped, and that just added to, like, like the scariness of it all. And I was listening to it in my room, and I think I had that body count moment. It was the first time I was listening to it. I was like, oh no, what is this? Like, what am I listening to? And but yeah, so, you know, I grew up listening to that kind of stuff. So when it came to 1-4, I was more excited that it was coming out from Australia this time. You know, because there were these young men from a certain environment being, like, raw, being honest about, you know, their upbringing and what they do. And again, it's that element of danger and anti-establishment that I was excited about. But even beyond that, it was their musicianship. You know, like, yeah, they were talking. You know, it was quite violent and there was a lot of energy, but they were still excellent rappers at the end of the day. And, you know, the combination of all of that, like, I was excited. And you know, the young Pacific Islanders, I saw them, and they look like my nephews. You know, my little cousins, and yeah, I just knew that this type of music and their voice needed to be empowered.
This brilliant scene you paint in the book of meeting them in a restaurant, and it's just, so I won't spoil it, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful moment, actually. It's really lovely the way you describe the restaurant. They clearly have an extraordinarily strong vision, an unshakable vision. How do you fit into that? How do you help them understand, like, I can see where you are. If you just kind of move this a little bit that way or this a bit that way, here's where it can go.
Yeah, that is, you know, and again, that is credit to them for wanting to meet up, for being open enough to listen. And I knew they knew what they wanted to do, but they just kind of lacked the knowledge of how to do it efficiently. And that's where I came in. You know, one of my first questions was, you know, besides the legalities, you know, the legal troubles you're having, what is stopping you from diving headfirst into this? And they said studio. They would use a street uni studio, but, you know, that was few far between. And so I said, yeah, like, if I can get you a studio, like, we turn up. And they said, you know, name me a date, a place, we'll be there. And they did. They rocked up on time, ready to go. And I just was able to introduce, like, structure, how to use your voice, like what words that would fit better with other words. You know, just kind of I guess a lot of fine tuning,
Yeah.
because I didn't want them to lose any of their rawness, because that was the charm of what they did. Like it was a bit rough around the edges. Sometimes the flow was a bit ahead of the beat, but that didn't matter. It was just about kind of capturing that energy, and then within the studio, because I also said like no drugs, no alcohol in the studio, and they were like, okay, you know, I said, when you
Why
come
would you
here,
do that?
what you do out. I just didn't want them to feel like the studio was party time. Like a lot of artists, you go there and they think it's the time where they smoke weed and have the drinks and have the girls around, and they just kind of, it's like I said, like a party. I said, nah, this is a working environment, man. Like we come here, like what you do outside the studio, that's on you. You're young adults. But when you're here, this is when you work, and you have to listen to what I say. Not me telling you what to do, but listening to what I say. Um, and they did. And I mean, there was a few hairy moments outside of the studio that you kind of have to deal with. But what was important to me is that they turned up and they were ready to record, ready to write, ready to listen, and they did.
Listening to, and like, most people who are nearly 50, I discover a lot of new music through the kids in my life, the young people in my life. And I discovered ONEFOUR through G. And listening to Shanks and Shivs the first time, I was like, oh, fuck. It was just this
Yeah,
like, this is Sydney. Fucking hell.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
you
I
know,
mean, even the video, you're just like, oh
oh my
shit.
God. Amazing. But reading in the book, we talked about work ethic before. Reading in the book, these young men were ready to work, to show up
Mm,
and work. Like you talk about studio time. So they were trying to record this song an hour at a time, a few weeks apart. That's hard to get continuity. It's hard to keep showing up.
yeah,
It's hard to
yeah.
keep being
And
there.
even then, they said that when they had that hour at Street Uni, they'd watch YouTube 40 minutes and then be like, oh, there's 20 minutes left. We better start working on the
Ah,
song. Whereas in my domain, it was like, get there, we're kicking off straight away.
yeah. And describing the work ethic made me, that was insight to why they are who they are now.
Mm.
Is they are ready to go. They are not here to fuck spiders. They are on.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was actually really, I was stoked to see that, that they take this as seriously, and this is super important for them to,
Mm.
to communicate. It would, to talk about a band like ONEFOUR without talking about the legal issues around them. What's it like trying to be a part of helping a band where some of the people in the band are behind bars?
Yeah. It is tough, because before we go into that, I was laughing to myself when you're talking about Shanks and Shivs, and I think I talk about it in the book where we get in there, we're all kind of sitting in the studio and like, okay, like, we have some beats, like, what's the first song we're going to do? And I think it was YP, said like, Shanks and Shivs. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is where we're starting. Like, I was just like, because it was just so blatant, like in your face. But you can't stop that kind of stuff, like,
But if they're trying to
if I
describe
was feeling like,
their life,
yeah, yeah, for sure. But the other songs they do talk about it, but the title was something else. But then the title of the song was Shanks and Shivs, and I was just like, okay, all right, if this is gonna be it, then let's go. But yeah, like dealing with that, yeah, it's a learning experience. I never learned about the law so much than dealing with those guys,
yeah,
and a lot of the reason why they went inside is happened before we met.
yeah.
And we've had conversations about that, and sometimes I would say like, "Oh, we wish we had met you before, because it would have given us something to work towards, and maybe we wouldn't have ended up where we ended up." But it is what it is, and that kind of it kind of built them to where they were anyway. And Ricky, I'm not sure if you know Ricky. He manages them now. He's a good friend of mine. Like he has dealt with a lot of that as well. And I don't know, you just have to adapt and navigate it as best as you can, because, you do mentoring, but it's mainly on a music level, and you try to mentor them as a as an elder as well. But they also have their own parents.
Yeah.
Like they're you don't want to be trying to act like their parent either. When they have parents, that they could easily just be like, well, we're here for the music, man. We're not here for you to parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and like everything else, it's like, look, the options are there. If you take this option, this is where it's most likely going to end up. If not, then we're going to be doing this, and you're going to be better for it. I would often say too, like, because they still get, especially in those early days, they were still heavy in the streets, and all these blogs would be coming up on Instagram, and people sending videos of stuff happening out in the streets, and I would just be like, oh man, and it'll be a bit of a headache, but the biggest story was always about providing them an option of getting out of that and using music as the vehicle. And music was my specialty, and me being a Pacific Islander as well, we had that connection, and they looked at me like an uncle. But at the same time, they're young adults, and they're gonna do what they're gonna do.
Reading about how and being aware of what was happening, how law enforcement at least in New South Wales were just doing everything they could to stop these guys performing live.
Mm.
Like, and putting cease and desist orders on the streaming services. Why why do you think what's behind that?
Man, to be honest, I don't know. We can talk about like systematic racism. We can talk about biasness, bigotry, all of that. I think the thing that kind of makes me laugh is how they don't recognize them doing all of that. Just makes them bigger.
Mm.
Makes ONEFOUR bigger, more notorious. People that hadn't even heard of them, but have heard of them only through them being in the newspaper, their shows being shut down. People are,
Yeah.
have you heard of this group ONEFOUR? And like, but that's the argument. It was always like, yeah, but you guys want these guys off the street, right? Like, so you're essentially blocking that channel of them being able to earn money, and then not wanting to earn money off the street. So, like, which one do you want?
Yeah.
Like, you want to force them back on the streets, or do you want them to find somewhere else where they can earn money and move their family out of their area? You can't have it both ways.
Part of me, and nice from the area, nice. Part of me, part of me is like, why would you deny these people who are Australians and live in Australia and are Australian citizens? Why would you deny them talking about and describing what their actual day-to-day life is like as a result of the systems that our country has in place? Is it because you don't want those outcomes to be known of the systems? Like, part of me is like, they are who they are because of the systems that you're upholding. Surely that system needs help if this is what fucking is happening. All right? Surely it's
100%.
like, for me, it blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there was a great story that was written by Osman Faruqi about, he interviewed I think it was the commissioner or something, and Oz was saying like, oh, they're rapping about what they know, and the guys, oh, they should write. Like, I'm no artist, but I think they should write about love and stuff. And I was like, first of all, yeah, you are no artist, and like, how are you going to tell these guys what to write?
Yeah.
They write about what they know, what they're accustomed to, what they're experiencing, and like you said, you can't deny them that. You can't deny them to be able to earn a living off a passion, and essentially get them out of your hair. So like, let them do it.
And for anyone that has stopped this podcast to go and listen to some ONEFOUR and then their knees are shaking a bit, how can we talk to our kids? And like, if our kids we find them listening to ONEFOUR or drill rap or Skepta or whatever, like, how can we talk to them about that music that isn't, don't you listen to that, because that'll just make them want to listen to it?
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, exactly. That's the way of a youngin', isn't it? Like, oh, don't do that. You're like, oh, okay, not okay. I'm going to go do it. And so I knew that, and I know, like, drill and a lot of hip hop is quite explicit. And so, yeah, it was just talking about, well, first of all, my son's quite inquisitive, so he would ask a lot of questions first, and that's how it became, explaining why the things that they talk about, why they talk about it, why they feel it's important to say it, and also understand that for every, there are consequences for your actions. And, he would ask, like, oh, why are they in prison? And I would simply say, like, well, they broke the law. And sometimes when you break the law, you have to pay debt to society. And that sometimes includes going to prison. And so you just make people understand, oh, well, my kids understand. Because my son sees them, he sees himself in them, in the fact that, they're Pacific Islanders, not, for any other reason. And he likes the music and the energy. But it is about breaking down why they say it and why they feel the way they feel. And you as a kid growing up in the eastern suburbs, you can't necessarily do that because that's not your environment. That's not where you come from. But still enjoy the music. And my son, he senses himself too when he raps. Like, he raps along to the songs and he cuts out the swears, and and it's not a constant thing either. He doesn't only just listen to drill or whatever, but
Yeah.
just when he does, it's I think it's important to have that conversation.
G does that. I noticed that G was doing that early too. G was doing that, 11 or 12. She would not say that word. And yeah, it was always a pretty cool. Yeah, like, you're right. There's this great line in the book that you write. It's like, just because my son raps along and says the word shank doesn't mean he's going to go use one.
Yeah, because I think there was a moment there too where a lot of young Islander kids were getting stabbed and killed, and our community was, oh, it's because of ONEFOUR, it's because of drill music, and I think that's just an easy escape. You know what I mean? And there were the conversations I would have with my kid as well, and it's deeper than music, like you say. It's the structure, it's the system, and it's just about understanding all of that.
Speaking of the system, you're jumping both feet, and you're for a decade and a half on the national broadcaster, being the voice, being the voice of Australian of the Australian hip hop scene. And look, I don't think I'm saying anything out of school, but Triple J historically struggled to play black music. But then you look at the 40 years of Triple J and look how many black artists were on that. What was it like to be within that system, trying to push or trying to celebrate this this form, this art that speaks to so many people who are Australian, and yet still be within this system that's like, is that?
Yeah. It was interesting. When I was offered the job, I did think a lot about that, and a lot of my peers felt a certain way about Triple J at the time, and because of that reason, but I just remember my uncle would always say, like, it's easier to change something from within, and I thought about that, like, okay, if I get into Triple J, that would be able to give me a platform to support the music I love, and the art, give the platform to artists I feel needed, to be empowered, and full credit to Triple J, because they were like that. They said, we like what you do, we know your shit, so just make the show yours, and that's what I did, and I will play anything and anyone I felt needed to be heard, whether it was a kid who just popped out a tape, bad quality, but you could see the potential, to your Nas's and Jay-Z. And it was a tremendous responsibility, but something I took on wholeheartedly. And just like just the passion for music, it just drives you. And I'm fortunate that my golden era is the late '80s and early '90s, but still love everything that's coming out today. And it's kept me in touch with the younger generations, and in a lot of ways kept me young at heart. And it was a beautiful run, and I have a lot of love for Triple J, and um, just hope they continue with backing these artists of Australia.
Stepping away from a job like that is a big deal.
Yeah, I told him, I said, "What, you got to fire me because I'm not leaving on my own accord."
Yeah.
Not that they fired me, but like, yeah, yeah. Again, it's tremendous honor, and I loved that responsibility. But the young generations, they have to have the opportunity to start their own legacy, build their own
Yeah.
legacy, and that's not going to happen if I'm going to be there for 40 years. I mean, 14
Mm.
years is long enough, but I think my role by me was needed to kind of bridge a lot of gaps. And now we're at a certain place where we can have the younger generations come through and take it on from there. And I'm excited by that. I'm excited to find the not even the next Hau, like the new whoever to build on and add on to what has already been built.
I remember interviewing, I can't remember who, it was an Australian hip hop band at the time, and they were really vocal. Like, I never hear anybody giving shit to it as a rock and roll band for singing in an American accent. But why do they give me
Mm.
shit for rapping in an American accent? And at the time, I can understand you're imitating the only music that you know. And,
Mm.
art is a conversation. All art is a conversation.
Mm. Mm.
Silverchair put out a record. What was it in response to us? Because what they were hearing on the radio, right? So
Yeah.
over time, we've kind of evolved from this, taking this thing and not exactly replicating it, but, doing a version of it to thank you very much. We'll take these building blocks and now we're just going to, you know, yes, I know it says spaceship on the front of the Lego box, but I'm going to build a fucking, tree,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
build a pressure cooker, whatever. Where do you see this genre of art, this genre of music going in Australia?
Man, that's a quite a hard and broad question. I just feel with the new generations coming through, we will eventually find our own sound. I think we're kind of scratching the surface right now. Because I think obviously we have some great, great artists. But at the end of the day, we're still doing our versions of drill. We're doing our versions of grime. We're doing our versions of trap, and they're good versions. But there never really has been an Australian hip hop sound, and that's why I'm an advocate for using our accent, natural accent, because that was what was going to automatically differentiate us
Yeah.
from artists from the US, from the UK, Europe, and the accent and our subject matter. But in terms of sounds, I think the closest that I've seen was Hooligan Hefts and his kind of mix of hip hop, drill, and like EDM. And like it's not my sound, but it was really a kind of, oh shit, this is uniquely Western Sydney. Like,
Right.
just that kind of high energy, but with the raps and they're dancing, and I was like, oh wow, this is like essentially could be like our grime, because
Yeah.
that's uniquely British, the same as drill and jungle and all that. But yeah, so I think this, us finding our unique sound where people around the world go, oh, that must be Australian because
Yeah.
for better or for worse, that's our sound.
How when the Australian music, you don't get into Australian music to make a lot of money. It just doesn't happen. You've got to, it's just, unfortunately, it's just how it is. How do you keep your feet on the ground? How when the bills are piling up, or between tours, or this gig didn't come through, or something happened? Like how do you keep your feet on the ground? How do you keep your head high? What are some things that you do to deal with things when it's hard?
Yeah, I had to work, like for when I first moved to Sydney, we had just won an ARIA award, but I was working retail, like that's just what you have to do. Like by any means, you work to support your dreams or your passion, and just knowing that, and knowing that is fine as well, because I think there's a kind of shame, like you're a rapper, but then you're a tradie at the same time. It's like, no, that's like you said, that's just the way it is. And there are very few that get to live purely off making music, make a living off making music. And I've been fortunate enough to be one of those. Not purely releasing music, but just involving music, like whether it's radio, this book, now working on some TV stuff. It's just constantly working and evolving. With the young artists I work with, I tell them, I say, look, you being an artist is what you should do. Like, concentrate on that, be the best artist you can be, but also know that this is just a starting point. Because I was that position before, and I didn't know it's going to be on radio. I didn't know. There's no way I thought I was ever going to write a book, but these opportunities came up, and I took them. And it was because I would constantly work, whether it's retail or like mixing concrete. I did what I needed to do in order to keep this passion alive, because that's what made me truly happy.
And getting out of bed on a stinking hot, Western, like Queanbeyan or New South Wales day, to go and mix some concrete, you're happy to go and do it because that's ultimately funding the thing you love to do.
Yeah, I'm definitely not happy, but definitely not happy doing. But you're right. Like, having the knowledge of, like, okay, I'm gonna get some money, and this is going towards something, and you just got to do it.
I love that, man, because that's I can't remember. I think, was it Cormac McCarthy? So I work to not work.
It's like, that's perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I think, and also I often thought, I would do retail like 10 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours something, and I would find myself missing music, and that was important. Because I was constantly thinking about, I can't wait to get home and write this bars down, or this beat or whatever, and just kind of like, distance makes the heart grow fonder. Like, I think that was part of it.
How is there a mixtape based upon all the music you put in the book?
No, there isn't. I should put one together, at least a playlist.
Dude,
but
can you please make a playlist?
Yeah.
Because when I got to the Souls of Mischief, I got to this 93 till Infinity chapter, I was like, "Fuck yeah, Souls of Mischief!" I'm like, I want that. I want the Rage playlist. I want to hear it. I want to hear all these songs in a row.
Yeah, I remember Rage saying they had the hip hop special nights. Man, I used to live for that night. But it'd be always the same. It'd be like Public Enemy, Night of Living Bassheads, Third Bass, Gasface, Power by Snap. Like, it was always the similar ones. But man, those were some awesome nights.
Please put together a playlist. I don't care where you put it. Just put it out with the book. And like, this is the soundtrack. Here's the book. Off you go. Because
no, I'll definitely get onto that.
I want to hear De La Soul as I imagine what was happening to you at the gig. I don't want to spoil it, but man, that broke my heart. That part in the book. Yeah, it was amazing. But I could talk to you for hours about this shit, but like, honestly, just thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you so much for documenting so much under the guise of, it's an autobiography. You have of a musician in Australia. You have also written so beautifully about the Pacific Island diaspora, which has many commonalities, whether they be from Tonga or Samoa or Fiji or any other part of the country, any other part of the Pacific. And it's a beautiful story because it is as much an Australian story as anything else. And I'm just so freaking grateful you wrote it, man.
It is a very Australian story, and that's what people want to get across to people. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate those beautiful words, and I appreciate you. Like I said, I grew up watching you through Channel V, and then venturing off doing a lot of presenting work and radio, and you're very loved in this household. My kids love my singer. They love.
That's pretty fun.
They see my wife was bachelor, so you're very much part of the part of the Latukefu household.
Hau, you're amazing. Thanks for writing this book. It's great. It's such a beautiful trip, such a journey, and the music was in my head the whole time. And you're just the best, Hau. Thanks heaps, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Thank you for your time.